Okay, let's get started. Hi, everyone. Welcome and welcome back to Cafe Oleh. My name is Jay Rosen. Here at Cafe Oleh with Nefesh B'Nefesh, we go over the everyday Hebrew you need in Israel to succeed. Whether that's reading and paying your bills, going grocery shopping and reading nutritional labels, keeping up with the news, striking up a conversation, job interviewing, dating, flirting, complaining, all the everyday things you do in your native language in your country of origin, but in modern Israel in modern Hebrew. As always, we'd like to hear from you what topics you'd like us to cover. You can always be in touch with us by email at hebrew@nbn.org.il. If you're joining us live on Zoom, you can write to us in the chat with any questions, comments, concerns, or topic requests you may have. You can also see all of our previous lessons on youtube.com. I know I say that every week, folks, and I'm breaking it up here because we've gotten quite a number of emails from you. And I also see in the chat quite a few times, could you give me the link for this or that? Y'all can look for it yourself. We have over 180 past lessons on YouTube, all free, all at your convenience. All you need to do is go to youtube.com, type in Cafe Oleh. The first search result that comes back will be a link to our playlist. You'll see over 30,000 views, 180 past lessons. You can subscribe to us. You can leave us a message in those comments. Then equally important, you can do your own search in that playlist or in general on YouTube. So if you want to see if we covered something, for example, volunteering in Israel, type in Cafe Ole volunteering. We've done at least one, I believe, two classes on that. Okay. So for all of you, highly recommend using all of our previous lessons. They're there for a reason for you to review on your own whenever you would like, which also gets to today's topic. But before I get to that, if you're joining us live on Zoom, remember that the Q&A is open to you for asking any questions you have about this specific topic that we're about to start. And if there's time, any other questions, everything else, please reserve to the chat and just leave the personal chit chat to a minimum. You can always direct message someone in the chat if you're joining us live. We're currently at 257 participants, so toda rabah, thank you all for joining. And the number is only going to go up, which testifies to we remain the world's largest regularly scheduled Hebrew class, which is really amazing and testament to all of you. So again, toda rabah, thank you all so much. So apropos reviewing, a couple weeks ago, we did a class on what I called It's All in the Details, articles and auxiliaries, meaning all the small words, especially small words that mean a lot in languages like English, but we don't have in Hebrew, right? You may remember this. I'm going to show it to you as a review because it's important that we do review collectively, not just you individually by looking at our lessons on YouTube. Right. So if you remember a couple of weeks ago, we did this because this came up a lot in questions about, Jay, what happens because there isn't a word or I can't find the word for example, a or an, am, are, or is, as well as to have or to have and has, right? Or to get and become. We don't have those words in Hebrew that work the same way that they do in English and in other languages. So we spent a lesson talking about a bunch of these, right? For example, how do we replace a or an, right? As in a rainy day, yom gashum, right? Versus the day is raining, hayom gashum, or the rainy day, hayom hagashum. And understanding, even if we don't have the exact translation of a word in Hebrew or the exact replica of it, we can still convey the same thing. And that's really important when you're learning any language, and especially Hebrew. I do this out of love and passion and also understanding how frustrating it can be. And there's a number of reasons why people get frustrated learning Hebrew. And it's not always stone cold reasons. A lot of them are usually emotionally bound. I learned Hebrew as a child and now I forgot it all, or Hebrew is so wrapped up in my Jewish identity, but I don't understand what they're saying because this isn't the same Hebrew I use at the synagogue, or a thousand other reasons, right? So let's not take it out on literal translation because oftentimes literal translation will mess us up in any language. That's not a Hebrew only thing. That's a general translating from one to another language. So the reason why translators are still a very lucrative position in that they're sorely needed to get through expressions that don't translate directly or intonations or tones that simple texting or AI tools can't always pick up. Right? So something like this, Yom Gashum, Hayom Gashum, Hayom Hagashum. That little bit, that little prefix ha, right, which is indicates the definite, the easier word in English is the, right? Makes a big difference because we can go from a rainy day, the day is rainy, or the rainy day. Okay. We went through this the other week. And I broke it down as much as I could for all the different ways you can learn this, right? And then we got to this slide, and this slide threw a lot of you apparently a curveball. I mean, a lot of you. I saw it in the comments. I saw it in the emails. A lot of you couldn't deal with this slide. Yom echad made sense. Yom is the word for day. Echad means one. And then we get to this one. Eze yom, right? Some people really, for lack of a better term, flipped out in the comments, and rightfully so, because what happens when you learn a word meaning eze, which means which, when we learn it in everyday Hebrew school or in everyday Jewish day school or yeshiva or university, we learn it as eze. But all of a sudden you hear eze yom, and Jay translates as someday. It's like, wait a minute, you just taught me that word. I know that word meaning which, and now you're telling me to mean some. Guess what? There are certain words that have one meaning in the dictionary and a totally other meaning when it's used in everyday life. We have that in English. You may not recognize it because English is your home base, or whatever language is your native tongue. You aren't always understanding it, right? That's what we call a cognitive bias. You don't always see what's in front of you and what may be difficult for others. I always try to say that when people ask about, well, Jay, how important is it to speak with an accent in Hebrew? And I say, try to explain how to make the English, the American English R sound. It's a very complicated sound. It's the reason why it's one of the last sounds that a native English speaker learns when growing up. It's also one of the hardest sounds to master outside of the English language because it's a difficult sound and it's a very rare sound. Okay. Eze yom translates to what a day or someday or what kind of a day was this? Exclamation point, right? That doesn't work if you're only thinking about what the dictionary says or what you were taught in class. So today we're going to look at some more examples of words like this. They're not slang. They're not idiomatic expressions. They're words that have their own meaning that isn't so easily searchable in a dictionary, but you'll hear all the time. Okay. And I really want in not just this class, but in general for everyone, when you're learning a new language, you're learning a whole new way of expressing yourself. It really is true. And so that requires a little bit of a more open mind, a little bit more patience, a little bit more understanding. And that's really about ourselves, not about the language. It's also about ourselves, right? Instead of attacking, wait a minute, I learned it this way, recognize when you say that, not to get too therapeutic here, but I do understand after doing Cafe Oleh for many years now, and now teaching a lot of one-on-one classes, how much learning a language, and especially learning Hebrew for Aliyah or just better understanding Israel, can become a form of therapy. So let's also recognize why we're learning this language, and when we get frustrated, where does that come from? It's not always just, well, I was taught this way, I was taught that, now I hear it's something else. Why is that such a, um, a stumbling point? Okay, so we're going to look at a number of examples today. Not a lot. I don't want to overburden you with a lot of examples, but I'm going to look at some key examples of where this happens, where we may have learned a word meaning one thing, but in everyday Hebrew, it means something different or it's used differently. And that's not to say what you learned is wrong. It's just also understanding what we learn in even in a modern Hebrew class taught by a native Israeli isn't necessarily where the language is today in 2026. That's a very important thing. Language always evolves. And just because someone's a Hebrew teacher, myself included, doesn't necessarily mean they know everything that's happening in its evolution. Think of it like any other creature, organism, it's growing on its own. We don't always have control over that. So let's look at some further examples. So as you'll see in today's table, right? First off, we have very few examples because I really want you to focus on these. You'll see I broke it down a little differently than usual, right? Sorry, just make this a little bit easier for me to read. There we go. So as always, Hebrew in the middle, transliteration of the words that we're looking at today. And then you'll see literal and actual. Okay, literal is think of it what you learned in Hebrew school or in day school or yeshiva or university, or sometimes what's only listed in the dictionary or primarily. And actual is how it can be used. It's not that the literal is wrong. Let me make that very clear, folks, before you come at me in the comments. And God bless you all, but there are some people who come at me in the comments, right? Literal does not mean it's wrong. It just means that it has an additional, I'll even write that here, actual slash additional meaning. Okay? So again, our word eze. You're going to hear eze all the time. Eze or its feminine version, hazel. Okay? And it does mean which. 100% it means which. It also means all of these things, such, some, so, what, i.e., which, and how plus a noun. Okay. You're going to ask me, Jay, how do I know when it is one of these things? Well, let's look at this example. This is a lyric from a song we actually looked at several years ago in the history of protest songs in Israel. And this is a classic from the 1980s called Ezo Medina. Ezo Medina does not translate to which nation or which country. It means what a country. I know that because of the context of the lyrics and that it's a protest song, but it's not asking a question. It's giving an exclamation. Ezo Medina, exclamation point. Ezo Medina meohadet bemina. The song is a reflection of the person's North African origins who's singing, so they pronounce chet as a het. Ezo medina meyohedet bemina. What a country, it's one of a kind, right? Or eze yofi, right? A classic one. Eze yofi. Eze yofi does not mean which pretty, okay? Sometimes it's best when we get frustrated by a word, think about, okay, stop, literally translate it, and does that make sense? If the answer is no, we need to look for another definition of that word. So in the case of eze yofi, right? Eze, we're taught, literally means which, and yofi means beauty. It is not saying when someone compliments you or compliments something or says something positive and they say eze yofi, it does not mean which beauty. Okay? It means how wonderful, right? And listen to how I said that and look at the words, and I'll even write that here. Eze yofi. Eze yofi. Eze, our word, and yofi is a noun, beauty. Okay, in every other sense, yofi is beauty. Okay, so when we put eze plus a noun, and it's not a question, which of these or which one or any of that, it means how or such or some or so or what. All these words, just like in the lyrics, Ezo Medina. Okay. Another word that has a very similar meaning is the question word, but we also use it in non-questions, kama. Kama means how much. Okay, it literally means how much. But we can also use kama in the same way we just use eze to mean how wonderful, how great. Um, for example, not there, sorry. Let me put it down here. Let me put another one down here. Don't worry, I'll show you our other example. Kama yafa. Look what we did here. Eze yofi, how pretty, how beautiful, how lovely, right? The word we're talking about plus the noun means how, wonderful, what, all those things. Now we're taking the adjective, right? Yofi, beauty, is a noun. Beautiful is an adjective, just like in Hebrew, so in English, and vice versa. Okay? Yafa. Yafa, yafe, right? All those words. So kama yafa, how pretty you are, right? I will write all the English for this. Don't worry, before you get the spreadsheet and we send it out along with the recording, you'll get all of these. Okay? So if eze yofi is how wonderful, right? How pretty. Kama yafa, how pretty you are, right? Slightly different meaning, but using the same word or the same meaning of the word, one being a noun, one being an adjective. Or most appropriate for today with the finally being able to sigh with some relief that the last kidnapped has come home, right? One of the songs that you hear, I've heard a lot in the last 2.5 years um, from Arik Einstein, and the song is Kama Tov Chazarta Habaita, right? How good it is. Chazarta, you returned habaita, home. Remember we talked about habaita the other week? Here's that word again. But look at how it starts. Kama tov. Kama tov does not translate to how much good, right? If you want to translate to how much goodness, that is on you. But the word is tov. It's the adjective, not the noun. So kama tov chazarta habaita, how good it is that you've come home. Okay? Let's look at another word. O mashu kazeh. O mashu kaze. O mashu kaze literally translates to, as you see on the left-hand side. Let me make sure that you can remember that we're talking about literal versus actual or additional, right? O mashu kaze translates to or something like this or that. And you will find sentences where it means or something like this and that, but it can also mean or so, right? A lot of these additional or actual translations, folks, are words that include the word so. Because think of how you use the word so in English. It has so many different applications. So when we learn a new language, when we learn a new language, we expect for many people who aren't familiar with other languages, we often expect what we call quid pro quo. Well, if it's like this, it must be like that. If this word exists in this language, there must be its same equivalent in another language. Languages don't work like that. It's not that you can't convey the same meaning, it's that you might have to use different words. Okay, so is one of those words. To get or become followed by a verb is one of those things. In English, we do it all the time, right? We even talk about this in a lesson we do a lot on don't say this, say that instead, right? To take a picture, to take a shower, to take, right? We're using to take in a way that in Hebrew, we only have one word. To take a picture, right, is litzalem, literally to photograph. But in English, we say to take a picture. We also say to photograph, by the way, right? Both of those mean the same thing. Well, in Hebrew, it's one word, litzalem, right? So could be translated in so many different ways. Just use so in a different way, right? Or so is one of those exceptions, is one of those examples, excuse me. O mashu kazeh. For example, ani tzarich od zman. We'll talk about od in just a minute. I need more time. Kishavua o mashu kazeh, about a week or so, right? I could translate this, of course, as I need more time. Ani tzarich od zman. Kishavua o mashu kazeh. Ke at the beginning of a word can mean both like, it can also mean about or approximately, right? Another way to think about this whole lesson, folks, is just that words have additional meanings. It's as easy as that. That just because we learned it as one way doesn't mean it doesn't have others. In this case, kishavua, like or about a week, o mashu kazeh, or something like that. You could translate that and you'd be pretty close. But if you want to say the equivalent in English of or so, that's how you're going to translate this. Ani tzarich od zman kishavua o mashu kazeh. Mashu kazeh you'll hear all the time. And it does translate to or so, just like in English. I need more time, about a week or so. Is the common way we would say that in English. So too you can say it in Hebrew, just slightly different words. Okay? A classic, ke'ilu. Ke'ilu does have a meaning, and it means as if, right? In a couple months from now, we're going to be celebrating Pesach, and it says that in each and every generation, everyone is obligated to see themselves ke'ilu hu yatsa mi Mitzrayim, as if he himself had left from the land of Mitzrayim, right? It means as if, and it's used that way in modern Hebrew to this day. It is also used to mean two other things. One is the equivalent of the California English like, meaning it's a filler between words or ideas or thoughts. Ki'ilu. And you've heard this before. We've talked about it before. It's still used to this day. It started with teen culture trying to find the equivalent of like um, as it exists in American English for Israeli Hebrew. And the word ki'ilu was picked, right? Was adopted. You've heard that. You've even seen skits. I've shown them, and you've seen them before, where every other word is the word ki'ilu. You'll hear it, especially among younger speakers. But it also has another meaning, and it means sorta. Right? There's a very famous comedy troupe we've talked about before called Hagashash HaChiver, and they popularized this other meaning, which means sorta. Right? So let's look at a very basic sentence, and that has two different meanings. Ani ki'ilu avadeti hayom. Part of this is about tone, and part of this is also context. Okay? Ani ki'ilu avadeti hayom could be I like worked today if we're using it meaning like, right? I like work today. And it doesn't mean like in the literal sense, just like the word like, folks. If you need a better illustration of what we're talking about here, the word like is a filler as much as it means to have an affinity for something. Okay? Context is important. Ani כאילו עבדתי היום. I like work today. Meaning they were trying to fill out the sentence and they had a pause, they added the word כאילו. It's instead of an M or an they needed something there. Right? But it can also mean אני כאילו עבדתי היום. Means I kind of sort of worked today. Meaning I didn't do such a good job today, or I didn't really focus a lot on work today. אני כאילו עבדתי היום. It's not אני כאילו עבדתי היום. Right? Tone is important, but context is important because obviously this isn't the one thing you're going to say and walk away. Think about everyday human communication, folks, right? Just because I'm teaching these sentences in a vacuum doesn't mean it's going to work like that. And in Cafe Oleh conversations, our Wednesday classes together, you're going to practice using these in the context of everyday human interaction. So there won't be that vacuum of understanding if this can mean one thing or the other. Right? It does not translate to I as if worked today. It means I like work today or I kind of work today. Stam. Stam means just or only. And in that context, it is a synonym of the word rak. Rak means only, sometimes it can mean just. Okay. But stam is used much more frequently, meaning like, if we're here, example, you see it all written out in two ways. One, with a bunch of letters that indicate you're supposed to drag it out. Stam. You've probably heard that before. Stam. Or even shorter, followed by a whole bunch of words, right? Or a very fancy way to say it, stam itchakamti. They both mean the same thing. Itchakamti, by the way, has the same root as the word chacham, smart. But in this case, itchakamti means I was being a smart aleck, right? Stam means just kidding in this context, right? It can mean just or only, but it often means JK, i.e. just kidding. Okay? Kirega. Kirega literally translates to approximately in a moment. Kit, remember at the beginning of a word can mean both like, but it also means about or approximately. And rega means moment, right? When you hear people say rega, rega, or they do this with their hand while saying it, rega, that means give me a moment, just a moment, right? Or rak rega, just a moment, right? Instead of stam rega, rak rega, okay? But kirega is better translated and better used to mean at the moment, right? ATM. אני עסוק כרגע. אני עסוק, not כרגע, כרגע. אני עסוק כרגע. I am busy at the moment. Okay? I'm busy at the moment. אני עסוק. עסוק means busy. כרגע, at the moment. Okay? It actually could be כרגע as well. But the point is, this is something you're going to hear all the time. At the moment is one word in Hebrew, כרגע. It does not translate literally in either way. Okay? Could you say ברגע הזה? Absolutely. But remember what we've talked about many times, folks. Many, many times, and we'll continue to talk about this, an untold law. of Hebrew that most Hebrew teachers fail to teach, except here. If you have two options for a word and they both mean virtually the same thing, and one word is shorter in letters, syllables, or in general length, you'll always pick the shorter. Hebrew and all Semitic languages prefer short words. So, barega hazeh, in this moment, right? Barega hazeh. 5 syllables, 2 words versus kerega. 1 word, 3 syllables. You're going to pick the smaller word. So kerega wins. Yes, you could say barega hazeh, but you just wasted a whole bunch of airspace, for lack of a better term, right? That's how Hebrew works. Smaller is better. Kerega wins. Is it the other way is wrong? Yes and no. No, it's not wrong literally because you're saying the same thing, but it's wrong because that's not the aesthetics of Hebrew. Kerega is the appropriate one. Another word, od. You've already seen it used a bunch here. You've learned this word and you've learned it meaning so many different things, right? Od can mean more, another, soon, right? Many of you know a bunch of different ways to think about this word. Another classic lyric here, Od tire kama tov yeh bashana haba'a, right? Kama tov, like we talked about before, kama tov chazalta habayta, right? But od tire, soon you will see, right? How good it will be in the next year or how good it'll be next year, right? You can use od in so many other ways. Od echad, one more, or another one is another way to translate that, right? Od has a lot of different meanings. The idea of this class, again, don't cubbyhole words into only one meaning because they often have multiple ones that you can understand through context. Maze. Maze is a little bit more slang in the context of it meaning more than just what is this, right? Maze. Maze, right? What is this? And it totally means what is this or what this is, depending on your intonation. Is it a question or sentence, right? But maze can also mean whata. And it really does need to be spelled whata so you understand it's a bit slang, it's a bit more vernacular, it's a bit more conversational, or so. אני מה זה עייף, רק נרדמתי ב4 בבוקר. That is a classic thing you will hear someone say, not necessarily the whole sentence, but how they said it. אני מה זה עייף. You hear a little bit of a sing-song in there and maybe a little bit of a question, right? אני מה זה עייף. I'm so tired, right? Remember that word so I talked about before and has so many different ways to use it. So here's another way to use it. Hope you got that right. אני מה זה עייף. I'm so tired, right? How would you translate if I didn't teach you this? Just think about this for a minute, folks. Ani means I, עייף means tired. How would you translate I'm so tired? How would you translate I'm so tired? Yes, I could say ani ayef me'od. I'm very tired. Is that the same thing as I'm so tired? In meaning you're about 80% there, 90%. But think about when you say I'm so something. I'm so busy. There's a little bit more emotion there. There's a little more oomph there than I'm very busy. I'm very busy sounds a little bit more flat. It's a little bit more um, measurable. It's a little bit more quantifiable, I think, versus I'm so busy. I'm so busy has a little bit more emotion behind it. It's not just I'm very busy, I'm so busy. I'm maybe even overwhelmed by it. That's what we're talking about here when you say ani mazayef. And by the way, it doesn't have to be like this. It could be wada, right? What a hunk. Mazechatich. You've probably heard younger people say that before, right? You may have even said it yourself. What a hunk, right? And we're not talking about a hunk of food. We're talking about a person, right? Same thing here. Ani mazayef rak nildamti ba'arba b'boker. If you want to say the equivalent, I'm so tired versus I'm very tired, this is your word. This is your expression. Ani maze. Okay. And then finally, in this small group, and I told you it was going to be small today, but I think this was important to do some review because we had so many questions come up in the last time we talked about that one word, AZ, that I wanted to bring some other examples. Zotomeret. Zotomeret is a really important expression, folks. It's already in the Talmud, both versions of the Talmud. We use Zotomeret, slightly different, but we use it in everyday Hebrew, and it does translate to this says. Yep, that's the literal translation. Zot is just the feminine version of ze, meaning this or that, and omeret says, from the verb lomar. But when we use the expression zot omeret, it really means it means, right? And you may have heard it even more truncated. Maz omeret, right? What does this mean? Or what do you mean? Right? Mazdomeret, where we put ma at the beginning and we just push it all together. Mazdomeret, right? What does that mean? Usually taking a little bit of offense at something. But zotomeret is as if to say it means, in other words, accordingly. All those fancy expressions in English, we simply say zotomeret. We have other expressions, similar words in Hebrew for sure. Excuse me, but zotomeret is a very popular one. For example, this was actually generated by AI. So AI does actually have some value in learning a language. Ani lo panui machar. I'm not available tomorrow. זאת אומרת שנצטרך לקבוע ליום אחר. Which means, or it means, that we will need, נצטרך, we will be in need, לקבוע, to schedule ליום אחר, for another day. Okay? אני לא פנוי מחר, זאת אומרת שנצטרך לקבוע ליום אחר. It means that we need to meet another day, or which means we'll need to meet another day. זאת אומרת is a really important one. Okay. In Arabic, for example, and it's a word that's borrowed into Hebrew, we have the word yani. You've probably heard that before. Yani, or if you really pronounce the ayin, right? Yani, right? Yani means. It literally means means, meaning, or it means. And you'll hear people in Israel say it because it's so important to further explain what you're saying, right? We have a whole bunch of other words that are like that. We have a very high-level word that also comes from a neighboring Semitic language, Aramaic, dehainu, which is a very fancy way of saying zotomeret, right? Both of them are ways of saying the same thing in Hebrew, zotomeret. That is to say, right? There's another way to think about it. That is to say. It does not translate literally, right? Because it translates literally as this says. But in everyday Hebrew, we use this to further explain ourselves. Okay. All these words, by the way, all of these are what we're going to be practicing in Wednesday's Cafe Oleh conversations. You're going to get a copy of this spreadsheet, and you're going to get a number of conversation prompts that are going to force you to use these words. And that's why I want to keep it small for this week. I really want you to practice these words because these are very commonly heard and used in modern Hebrew, especially the word that started this class, Ezeh. Okay. Before I get to your questions, because I see we have a number in the Q&A, this is also a reminder, the Q&A is only for questions that you want me to answer today. If you have any questions, anything else, please put in the chat or please email us at hebrew@nbn.org.il. Before I get to your questions, I want to tell you about next week's class. I just want to open up and make sure I got the right day. Awesome. Next week, we are getting closer to the next Jewish holiday, Tu B'Shvat. Tu B'Shvat is quite an important holiday in Israel, in modern Israel, in Zionism, in all sorts of different ways. And we're going to celebrate not by talking about picking fruit, which we've done in the past, or volunteering in agriculture, which we've done in the past. We're going to cover a topic we haven't done for some time, but you hear me say every week, week after week, in fact, in the intros, reading a nutritional label. So next week is all about nutrition and nutritional labels. I think a really important topic that we underestimate when we're moving from one country to another on our own volition, especially in the 21st century where people have diets, people are on certain fitness plans, people just want to know what's in their food. It's not just an issue of organic or not. It's all sorts of other issues, maybe dietary restrictions or sensitivities or allergies. I just want to know what's in my food. We're going to cover it by doing what we've done in the past. Look at a nutritional label anywhere in Israel and how to read it and what are the main words we're looking at. Okay, that's next week's class. But until then, let me start answering some questions here. Okay. Is it incorrect to say kama tov shechazalta albayta? Note the additional she. I do indeed note the additional she. You can say kama tov shechazalta albayta. How good it is that you returned home, right? And in a lot of Hebrew, we use she, the prefix she, which is short for ashil, which means that or which. We use that quite a lot. It's not that it's wrong. Remember, this is a song lyric. Song lyrics can take a little bit more poetic license than every other word, but you can say "Kama tov chazalta baita," right? Just like in English. Listen to English. In fact, I illustrated here perfectly. Kama tov chazalta habaita. How good it is your home versus Kama tov she chazalta habaita. How good it is that you're home, right? All that's missing is the word that. I can say the same thing with or without that. So yes, you can use she. It's not wrong using it either way. Okay, when at an appointment for something and you are waiting for someone to come, the office will say hu kvar ba. So you wait right there, but it doesn't mean they're coming now. Can you explain? Yes, we've talked about um, directions before. We've done this actually a couple times. Directions and invitations and extending invitations and accepting and all those different things. And we've talked about something that's jokingly called Israel Standard Time. And this is very much a thing. And it is definitely one of the biggest, I don't think the most important, but it's definitely a big cross-cultural challenge for those from Western Europe and North America. Israelis typically, except for very specific circumstances, are typically not coming on the dot to an event or even a medical appointment, right? It is understood you don't show up right on the dot. It's okay if you don't show up right on the dot. Even if you do, it's one thing, but coming early usually is not the case. So, for example, if the office says, "Hu kvar ba," he's already coming, that's like saying, "I'm on my way." Ani baderech. Ani baderech in Hebrew means that for like a lot of cultures around the world, it can mean I have the idea that I need to leave, I literally am on the way, or I'm somewhere in the middle. Okay, so hu kvar ba is not a measurement of time. He's already coming is not a measurement of time. It may be a measurement of time in your home country, in your home culture, but it is not in Israel. It does not dictate how far away that person is or when they left. Ani kol kach ayef. Um, yes. Ani kol kach ayef. I am very tired, or I am so tired. But ani kol kach ayef. Yes, that's a good way to also translate ani maze ayef. But ani maze ayef, think of it as like wada or so. It's a little bit more slang. It's a little bit more emotion packed. Right? Can you use mamash to express so? Yes, mamash is a synonym of the word me'od, very. Ani me'od ayef, ani mamash ayef. Yes, they both do. What stands out with mamash, and thank you for pointing out that word, is like maze, you it's important to listen to how Israelis talk, just like it is when you're learning any language, how people use language to convey emotion. And it's not just the choice of words, it's what words they use that aesthetically, that the sound of them indicates something more. Ani mazayef, right? There's a little bit more of a whine there. It's a little bit more of a stretch, just like the word mamash. We've talked about the word mamash before. Mamash means very, but you can use mamash in a number of ways in modern Hebrew. For example, mamash, yeah, right, or this, the equivalent of this. right? Ani mamash ayef. I'm really tired. It still means really. Okay. But mamash, this letters of the word and the sounds of the word really indicate more emotion than ani me'od ayef. Okay. That has to do with how we make those sounds. It's a complicated answer, but what about kol kach? Ani kol kach ayef. Yep. Again, it's great that you all know synonyms for these. I'm trying to point out here what you're also going to hear that you may not learn in other Hebrew lessons. For example, ani mazayef. I will hear ani mazayef on the streets of Tel Aviv all the time. I can guarantee you in all my many, many years of learning Hebrew, including modern Israeli culture and modern Israeli literature, no one taught me that mazeh means me'od or kol kach or mamash or all these things that you're pointing out, which is great. Just because there's examples for it doesn't mean you're going to hear those, is what I'm trying to emphasize here. Zotomeret is always feminine, yes. Right? Zotomeret is always feminine. Okay? Do people say lemani mitkavenet? To what do I mean? Yes, people do say that. It is very formal Hebrew, but it is a great question. Lemani mitkavenet or lema at mitkavenet, excuse me. What do you mean? Right? What are you intending to say? What is your intention? Lemat mitkavenet. What do you mean? Right? Absolutely, people ask that. It's a little bit fancy, I gotta say. It's great Hebrew, but it's not necessarily everyday expressions. I would also like to know what phrases are often used sarcastically, as in the English phrase "it couldn't happen to a nicer guy" when some bad guy gets what's coming to them. Are there some Israeli phrases that are usually sarcastic in common speech? We've had several classes about this in the past. Highly recommend looking at YouTube where we talk about expressions and idiomatic expressions at that, but we have covered some of those. Like, for example, the expression "magialo." Magialo can mean both he had it coming in a good way or in a sarcastic way. What do I type in YouTube to get to the previous lessons? I said at the beginning of class, you're doing a regular, like you do on Google search, folks. Cafe au lait, the topic you're interested in. Pashut. Pashut is a great one. Oh, wow. Whoever wrote that, thank you for saying that, right? If I want to say, instead of ani mazayef, you can say ani pashutayef. I am simply tired. That's very close to the meaning of the word pashut, which means simple. It can also mean simply in that context. Again, I'm pointing out something that you're going to hear all the time that in formal Hebrew classes, they're not likely going to teach you. For example, mazeh. Great question. Mahakavana. Mahakavana means what's the intention? What do you mean? It's a little accusatory. It's a little bit more gruff than maybe you mean. Mazotomeret is usually a better way to say it. And mazotomeret, again, it depends on your tone. Mazotomeret or mazotomeret, right? They have different meanings in terms of what do you mean by that or what does that mean? Okay. Ma'akavana is you're asking someone a little bit more to give you details. What's the intention? Kavana is intention, but it also sounds a little bit more accusatory, like I don't quite follow you, slash you haven't done a good enough job explaining yourself. Okay. So again, toda rabah, thank you all for joining. Again, this class will be up on YouTube in the next day or so. YouTube is your friend, folks. Use it like a regular Google search or any search engine you use. Cafe Oleh, 2 words, and then whatever topic you'd look for. The spreadsheet that we went over will be up there as well. I'll also re-add the other week's presentation so you can see what we're basing this on. And Wednesday, highly recommend all of you to join for Wednesday's class, whether you are registered or not registered, whether you've registered and never shown up, whether you show up every week. We're going to be practicing these words that we saw today, specifically these, not all the great suggestions you gave and all the synonyms, these specific words in conversation prompts on Wednesday. And you'll get those at least 24 hours in advance of Wednesday's class. Until then, toda rabah, thank you all for joining, and I'll see you all very soon. Take care, litrot.